to communicate and share.
Oh yeah,
sorry.
Let me get this. Don't know what happened there.
No worries.
Yeah.
So, dude, we're very blessed people.
We are. There's so many of them.
To now, it's like, there's no doubt it's better. You should see what it was like.
Oh, you're a bit older than me.
A whole other world.
Yeah. But at the same time, maybe we can dive into this a bit as well, and maybe it'll actually bookend maybe a little bit of how you've kind of come to where you are, I guess. But but yeah, I'll make a note of that, because I'll if I can find a pen.
I think I've been using, personal archaeology is a great tool of discovery, right? You've got you're housed in this extremely complex piece of operational hardware that, you are given full experimental control over without signing paperwork.
Yeah.
And you're at the spear end of like innumerable numbers of interactions and outcomes, and you're still riding that inertia, and it's a wave to ride, or it's a destructive force cramming you into nothingness. And I like riding waves.
Well, you're lucky that you live where you do, because I live where I do, and there is definitely no waves to ride, which is kind of
hold on. I'm using this metaphorically.
I know, but
this metaphorically.
I also like to ride those waves. I would also, from my experience of riding real waves, I'd love to do that more as well.
Absolutely. And I think that fundamental, my personal archaeology is discovering how extraordinarily important the boom in beach culture was for all of us.
Yeah.
It has a history, it has characters, and it has momentum, inertia, and value. And that, my personal archaeology is getting into that, and realizing that what surf culture gave us is something extremely powerful. It's hard to look at and analogize life as being very much a destructive wave that's going to wipe you out, or the greatest possible ride, and some new ways to express what it means to be human on this ongoing, burgeoning, endless cloud of wave that comes at us continuously. So it's like, it's your choice. Both things are going to happen. You're going to surf sometimes when you didn't want to, you're just getting carried along. But the more intentional and the more skillful means you gain to be on that platform of you, in that nexus of now, riding that in a way, in any situation, everywhere. That's what surfing teaches us. There is a way.
Yeah.
And sometimes you got to go find different waves. Let's face it.
Yeah.
But if you find a good spot, what beach culture tells us is the good places in the world. If you arrive there basically in your birthday suit, you're already overdressed and all the good shit's happening now. So beach culture does that so well, right?
And I like that.
Humans have gravitated to that space, and here I am, one of them.
Well, perfect. Well, we might as well just, throw it out there. What I'll do is I'll just chuck it over to you, I reckon, and I'll let you introduce yourself just briefly, as say who you are, and then because obviously I know who you are, but we'll let others find out who you are, and then we'll I'll maybe just briefly tell you about me, and then we'll kind of pick apart some thoughts and philosophies and processes of life, I guess.
Oh, I like it. This is my kind of style. I like it. I like what I'm hearing. Yeah. Lead on. Tell me what to do. I'm here.
Well, you are Barefoot Ted, obviously, and obviously some of us will know you from a book called Born to Run, but there's more to you than just that. So fill us in. You're obviously wearing your Luna t-shirt as well. So
I got my Luna.
I want you to tell us a bit about that today as well.
Ted, yeah. There's that. So the book Born to Run, let's face it, it's been an incredibly interesting read for anybody. Basically, it's an incredibly, for many, many people, it's the first time they're confronted with the idea that they might have been born into a species that has some superpowers under the hood that were going unexpressed because either misunderstood or misapplied. And what I'm referring to is just in the book Born to Run, we meet some characters in there. One is Dr. Daniel Lieberman, evolutionary biologist at Harvard University, who is part of an ongoing, attempt, everlasting attempt of trying to understand the foundations of Homo sapiens sapiens, our species, supposedly, right? And the recognition that one capacity that human beings have is this long distance running capacity. I think that's been sort of, now it's a craze. It turned into a craze, like everybody suddenly wanted to run further and further and more, and including barefoot. And that's kind of the story I get introduced in this book as Barefoot Ted. And that's ties into the surf history and the skateboard history and California history, where it's not unusual. When I'm growing up in the 70s, my favorite clothing is called Hang 10. It's like I need the status symbol of two golden embroidered feet on my shirt in order to, and even with a working class mom, single family mom working, I could afford to have California made Hang 10 t-shirt with two gold, because the feet in the 70s and still even to this day somehow represent this natural connection, the interface between you and the world. And my goodness, the foot is an extraordinarily complex and wonderful, piece of equipment. I got one too. Yeah, my parents were kind enough, very kind.
Proper grubby.
And incredibly, and people would say, so Barefoot Ted, what's your favorite shoe? And I'd say, give me something that has like this real-time interface with brain body, nanotechnology for self-repair and healing, kind of like all this gets better with use kind of situation. And that really is in so many cases the foot. So I got introduced in this as this character who had been sort of extrapolating from the concept, if we indeed are evolved on this planet and we are the let's say apex hunter, in this case a concept called persistence hunting, which allows our ancestors, even today, there's people in the world. I mean, it's becoming more and more obscure because there's so many better ways to access food. But our ancestors had the capacity in their default equipment, i.e. just their body, no admixture of anything, coming up with ways to, chase down an 800-pound animal and, 2 to 5 hours later, after 18 to 32 miles, you have just, and with strategic hunting skills, you have run down an animal without even a weapon, and have been able to feed a family of, let's say, 30 people for a month. Yeah. It's a pretty damn good, that is one hell of a good, one guy can do that.
Yeah.
One guy. But he's a master. And so we have underlying all the hardware is this story, we have this. So I started playing in my own way. It didn't seem that counterintuitive for somebody growing up in California in the 60s and 70s. I mean, literally cross-country teams in Southern California back in the 60s, if you look at the yearbooks, they'll be barefoot. They were being influenced by people like Herb Elliott, an Australian barefooter who became popular in the United States on the cover of sports magazine. So getting back to those fundamentals for me, when I was approaching kind of like a deadline of 40 years to solve this mystery for myself back in the day, barefooting became like, oh, maybe there's something here that I need to re-examine, since I had already had some capacity here. Yeah. So the book Born to Run uses me as a real character, let's say, who did this experimenting, and at the same time dovetailing it to these new understandings of human capacities that exist as a primary functional state for the, let's say, our species in general. Yeah. Combining those two in a character became what I got, and that sort of opened up a whole new world that I think not only invaded and ended up expressing a lot in the running world, where you started seeing more minimalist footwear or natural foot and so forth and so on, including the 5-finger shoe, and all of that, but also all these new other shoots that began for the first time to really begin to extrapolate, or at least play with the idea, if I was evolved on planet X, and these are the ideas of what was available, and this is how people did this and that and the other. And then, you've got this highly successful being that's developed out of all of those experiments. And then you realize, oh, if you have a beautiful hunting dog and you put it in a four, by, tiny little room, and you give it some kind of porridge made out of, look, I don't care if you got a Lamborghini and you put shit in it and you don't drive it and it's not tuned up, that thing is as good as nothing. Many of us find ourselves suddenly sitting on our butt, typing on a computer going, why do I not feel? And then suddenly you realize it's just this huge nature deficit, literally the hardware and the software is designed to be having lots of different things to be working on. Like a vital system is basically like a vaccine manufacturing unit. It's like continuously at war, and actually with things that are other than it, that are bad. And it turns out when you don't have any of those, you start attacking yourself. It's a terrible autoimmune disorders. It's like insane. And the same with not getting enough time where you're spacious, you're breathing, you're outdoors, you're touching the ground. So getting people even to add a tiny little bit more has become what Barefoot Ted ends up being a symbol for. And we've seen all these new, it's like we're having our own moment in history where innumerable numbers of people are regaining this insight and or finally justifying this insight in their own behavior up until now. And I think there's a lot better when suddenly people realize there's simple things I can do, primary simple things that will benefit me greatly, breathing the cold, getting some nature and all these. And I've, just looking at your Instagram, obviously you're doing all of those and encouraging others. And so we are in a boom of that. And I want to see more and more. Why not?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so just briefly, I mean, I've been barefoot now for I literally am barefoot. I mean, I'm in England, so I'm not as lucky as you because, our winters are pretty rank, but I'm barefoot from February, March through until November, partly due to laziness, I will be honest, because most of the time I can't be asked to put a pair of shoes on, but, I've become more and more adapted to it. And it's just one of those things, I started nearly 10 years ago now with, well, more than that, with some Vibrams. That was the first thing I came across, of some 5 fingers. And I kind of liked the idea because everyone hated them. Like when I wore them, everyone was like, that's fucking weird. What are you wearing? They're weird. Don't wear them. And so I kind of liked that about them. But, since then it's just gone on and on and on. And I've just kind of got to the stage I'm always barefoot these days. But you obviously in the book, and you just mentioned it, but with the Vibrams, you were like the first guy to really take what was supposed to, was it going to be a sail shoe or something, like basically a deck shoe, and turn it into something else?
That's right. The cool story about it is something along the lines of, first of all, Vibram was just, it's well known in the United States. We call it Vibram here. You probably know that, maybe. Yeah. But anyway, it became well known as these people care about trying to create good stuff. So, and I was in my own trajectory at that time, was back to this idea of trying to self-experimentation and trying to really understand what is it that we have as default capacities. What are our capacities in, without any admixture? And then I was at that moment, I was experimenting with barefooting, and I was also very, very fascinated by what I like to call the natural selection of footwear in human cultures, where you have peoples who, their goal for footwear isn't any kind of junk science or mass marketing or anything. It's like, does it work for what I need it to do?
Yeah.
And if I don't need it, do I have it? So what you find about indigenous peoples is that first of all, they know how to make their own toolkits of survival with things at hand.
Yeah.
And if they need something, they'll find a way to create it if it's a problem for them. So first and foremost, in most human cultures, if you don't need a shoe, you just don't, why have it? There's no need. So that's like there's that whole world. And there's so much of the habitable world that a shoe is really becomes for daily life unnecessary. And then it becomes necessary, and you have there's this whole great religious spiritual situation, like in the Western tradition, literally when Adam and Eve sinned, they literally, in the Hasidic Jew tradition, they literally had to start wearing sandals because the ground literally became against them. And you think about it, and that's where you begin to have this interface. It's like the world isn't all Eden.
Mhm.
And but human beings are clever enough to be able to come up with ways to sort of create Eden everywhere.
Yeah,
And that is sort of like a shoe, a simple sandal, which is everywhere in the human, everywhere where it suddenly becomes required. Usually it starts getting rockier or hotter, or there's natural brambles or anything that would even stop any other critter. As soon as a human being begins to figure out strategies to overcome those obstacles not driven by the idea I've got to do something for my foot as far as the fundamental engineering.
Yeah. But just
that's already what, the foot is already so complex that, Da Vinci says this is the preeminently engineered part of the human body, okay? Preeminently engineered part of the human body is the foot. Nobody needs to do much dabbling there. I mean, who knows? It's already hard enough when a simple sandal has a few little things to tighten here, there, and thither, and it's already overcomplicated for most humans. The foot is just loaded with stuff that's way beyond our understanding. However, the jewel of the foot is that as you begin to allow it to develop its functional strength and its understandings of the earth and its connection to the body, all this nuance of feeling and expression can come in movement and in life.
Yeah.
And so being connected is always good. And the footwear only comes in when you want to sort of start expanding that range and maintaining that comfort. So I think of footwear as like portable ground. They weren't trying to like repair the foot. They were just trying to bring something along so the foot could keep being a foot, even though we got brambles, we've got rocks, we've got heat, we've got whatever. And I think that's just an incredible part of the human game, is just finding ways to be natural while at the same time using this incredibly complex computer we've been given to like see that we can actually create as we go and make things better. But ultimately, it all comes down to a single human being who has access to a world unavailable to anyone else, their own private experience that's developed them into who they are. And what they can do, ultimately, they're responsible for that. They need to take charge of that little experimental freedom they have and begin to seek out teachers and others who will give them advice and skills and tools to allow them to hone and develop those tools that they have within themselves so that they can begin to find that solution that will be unique and specific to them with all these kind of resonating voices around them. But people need to understand, in the end, their ultimate expression of who they become is going to be unique and special to them. No one has the same, we're not cookie cutter, folks.
No.
So go for it, experiment, but it's not like, then people just took that book and it's like running forever all the time.
Well,
and it's like, I'm looking for the smallest dose that gives me the most return. I don't need to take, like King George 23 tablets because the regular guy only takes 3, he kind of miscalculated. Kingliness doesn't allow medicine to work differently.
Yeah, man. But what I mean, there was two routes or two things that's come off that, which I love. Is one is the essentially the N=1, the personal experiment. And I know, I'm fairly certain Brian McKenzie, and I've kind of had I've had him on the podcast, and I'm kind of quite friendly with Emily Hightower, who he works with at Shift and stuff. And I love that, everything they do is as you said, alluded to earlier, cold baths and saunas and stuff. Everything is very popular these days, but actually the way that those guys do it is so like, they look at the fundamentals and they look at the heuristics. They don't necessarily look at like, well, this is what someone said, and this is what this one research, or this is what these research papers say. It's like, but there's always outliers, and you might not be that person. And actually you need to take consideration of how your physiology, your life, your stress, everything is going to affect all of that. And, for me, I get lots of people saying about barefoot running, or, especially as, I don't know if you're probably not aware, but my work personally as a yoga teacher, but also I'm a movement therapist, and I don't know if you know Gary Ward and his work with feet.
Oh, nice. Okay, so yeah, you're. I mean, I got a flavor. Yeah, I'm loving to feel that. So you really are in this craft.
Yeah.
You literally are meeting people, the rubber on the road, literally helping people make this transition.
I'm trying.
And I
to.
really believe a lot of people, most people, if they have access to somebody, and that, I was lucky. I grew up wild and feral. So, and that didn't automatic. I did some teaching and stuff like that to try to sort of like integrate people into what I'd learned, but I always made it, I never wanted to be like the, like, I've got the plan that's going to work for you. I just wanted to always, in my case, share how I see it, what I do when I'm doing it. But you're going to, I never felt like I was going to be the expert, but I always knew there was going to need to be, particularly in places where this kind of culture isn't just alive. The surf and skate culture and all, so many of us had this experience under our belt at times now when I look back about how we were handling ourselves, as kids in the 70s in like conditions in surf and other places. It's this madness. There's just,
yeah, man.
It was like nothing. It was like, I mean, yes, it was challenging, but we wanted to do it. We were driven to, we were like in surf and pounding surf on cliffs, walking in bare feet, carrying scuba gears. I mean, unbelievable. We were just so tough.
So again, I mean, that's going to bring me back to where we almost started, to be fair, like, but I'm going to put that there so I can remember. But no, sorry, we'll do that one first. So essentially, then, how has like that side of your upbringing, if you like, you pointed before we started, or kind of maybe as we did start, but to the 5-year-old you or whatever's on the wall behind you. And we kind of were commenting about the amount of, how great social media is in so many ways. Like I just literally dropped you a line and was like, do you want to do a podcast? And, I've got to know people like Brian and Emily and Rob and Robert Fortune, who, he was like, oh, I was chatting to Ted the other day. He should get on his podcast. I told him to get on your podcast. It's so good in that way. But your wild, sort of slightly, out there upbringing, if you like, where it was just, I'm going to get out in the sand and surf and, I'm going to be skating, all of that. That's obviously influenced your view on life and your whole philosophy, I guess. And I know, because before this, I was listening to a few podcasts that you've been on and stuff, and you mentioned kind of the philosophers, a lot of Thoreau and some of the other American philosophers, and was it J. William?
Oh, J. William Lloyd. Yeah, I'm in that whole realm there. In the United States, there was this. And it actually had resonance and influence. It was one of the first sort of literary philosophical movements that sort of crossed the Atlantic. It was called they were called the Transcendentalists. There was a guy named Emerson, Thoreau, Walt Whitman was famous. They were really trying to, and they were reconnecting with nature, and this kind of like, they were also the first Americans to start like having access to like, pretty deep philosophical things coming up, from Indian writers and from the East and so forth. So you had this whole interesting mix, and then of course, as Americans, they were also able to see this. They were like intermixing with native cultures, true cultures that exist. So there's this. It's a very interesting intellectual movement, and I would say that kind of surf culture and this kind of back to nature kind of culture, which I'm researching, which has California becomes like the place where it really expresses big, because basically the big thing that happens is after World War II, you have a youth culture that isn't like, that has leisure time, right? Yeah. Suddenly you have a huge amount, and that leisure time for youth became kind of new in an industrialized culture, let's say after World War II. But in reality, in so many indigenous cultures, there's a lot of leisure time. It turns out that was one of the like things that sort of the sailors and people who were visiting these South Sea places were like seeing living cultures that were like way beyond and way freer and way happier than
Yeah.
anything they were seeing where they
In
had
Amer-
left back in London or Boston or whatever, right? They were like enamored with what they were seeing. And actually, I'm following this incredible thread that leads back to where the first sparks that really become these moments where Western man is having this insight into certain indigenous or other cultures and realizing, holy shit, I'm fucked. You know, I mean, like, you know, like these people are way happier, way healthier, way more capable.
Yeah.
And that theme kind of happens. And then suddenly you start, and the most interesting one, and it'll tie into what we're talking about here, is this Stanford student in the late 1890s. He's a sickly fellow. His dad's been a doctor. He's from Portland. He's been sickly his whole friggin' life. And he's at Stanford. He just wants to solve the riddle of his own life. He gets sick again. He's like, fuck it. I'm done. I can't take it anymore. And he literally just wanders off into the woods to die. And somehow in the process of getting out and away from all the shit, all the things that he was trying to do, everything, he found that by basically getting back, and he became the poster child.
Yeah.
And he's in San Francisco now, and he's walking around. This is in the turn of the century now. He's a fucking loony bin. He's walking around telling everybody, I found the answer. And it's like sunlight, and it's breathing, and it's getting back to natural foods, and it's walking barefoot. And it's like, he is inspiring people. He's like tripping people out. Jack London, a famous American popular writer of the time, gets intrigued by this guy, meets up with him, learns a little bit about this. And it turns out this guy, his name is Ernest Darling. He became known as the nature man.
Right, yeah.
Jack London finally has this, I mean, it's kind of a complicated story here, but in the end, what I'm telling you is I have, and I could, and I can't wait to find a way to package it and share it more. But I've been drilling down on what is it that gave us this space to have the freedom to investigate this area that's become such an attractive place to investigate. My own body, my own history, and what are its capabilities. There are people who have been outliers 100 years ago who stepped up and said this, that, or the other that today rings quite true, that back then was a fucking loony bin and you might go to jail. I'm not kidding.
Yeah, yeah. Well, on like that kind of, there was a program, and I didn't see it. My brother was telling me all about it, but basically, I guess it was probably in America, but like they basically took a whole group of social media like kids who were like influencers and stuff, and they've all got depression, they've all got anxiety and mental issues and stuff, and they basically took them and they put them on an Amish farm. Is it Amish? Yeah, Amish is the one with the
Amish,
big beards. Yeah, they build barns, right? Big beards.
Yeah, totally.
So they put them on an Amish farm where there's no technology. Basically, all they're doing is being outside in nature. They're getting their hands dirty. They're kind of essentially not living in their kind of Gucci and Nike and whatever else. And essentially, by the end of the month or 6 weeks that they do it, they're all fucking happy.
Yep.
Do you know what I mean? They're all like all of the mental and you know, my background is also as a nurse. So one of the reasons like I left nursing was just because like I felt like the health system was just missing a trick. And for me, it kind of makes so much sense that we over medicalize everything. And actually what we're missing is just a connection with like nature. And with other people.
Look, there's no money in it. You know,
no, exactly.
One of the things that, you know, it's like when you have all these, it's like, you know, there's so much good intentions in the attempts of trying to make people better. But after some point, you start realizing good intentions are not enough. And matter of fact, when you start mixing money and power with good intention, they might good intention your ass right to the grave real quick. So, you know, it's like, that's not enough. And when it comes to human health, there is no cookie cutter solution. So that's why all these programs that look like they're going to make everything better, I'm telling you, my God, the good intentions have gotten way out of whack. And we see what happens when you suddenly have people thinking they're so certain that all you need is what they know you need, man.
Yeah,
And we
man.
all know, anybody who has any experience in the health world knows there ain't no cookie cutter solution, folks.
Yep. And in fact,
There's
that kind
no
of
cookie
reminds.
cutter solutions. And the things that are cookie cutter solutions are get up in the line and we're going to give you a shot or a pill. Now, if you want to go that style, I think there will always be places where you can get in line and they're going to give you a shot and they're going to give you a pill. But I'm going to tell you right now, why bother if you don't need it? And if you don't need it, what do you need to do to be that? And that's getting back to any ways of finding ways to not unnecessarily overtoxinate yourself.
Yeah.
By, just by living off of toxins. This is very difficult. Even the complex, beautiful machine of the human body can only take it so long.
Yeah.
And that's same with it. But just like you said, there's so much like low hanging fruit that maybe the disruption of all these technologies that have been like keeping everybody will be good to shake it out a little bit. Not to say that there aren't all kinds of wonderful modalities of therapy and nutrition and all the rest.
Absolutely.
It's generally not the stuff that's you're seeing a commercial on TV where there's like 10 pages of after effects that you might get if you take it,
Yeah.
And if it's unhappiness that you're dealing with, it's a systemic thing in most cases. And you just need to like do exactly what those kids did. Get your ass out of that box every effing day, no matter what. Breathe, get some sun on your face. If that's it, it's not even really about endless exercising, really. No. More people just need time in spaciousness.
Well, I always say, and I heard you kind of talk about it, and you said it earlier, but like the smallest you can do for the biggest reward. And I always say, whenever anyone comes to see me for their pains, whatever, or they're learning to breathe because they're all kind of fucked with COPD or emphysema or asthma or whatever, it's like, don't worry about the idea of exercise, inverted commas. Think more about just moving. So like go for a walk. Like walking is the most rated thing in the world. And I kind of say this a lot on here and to different people, but I try to walk 15 to 20,000 steps ish a day. I just want to get out with my dogs and just be outside and breathe in nature. And, I don't know.
You can't make a pill that good, man.
You can't,
There is no effing pill in the history of the world that's as good as that. And then there's a way, it's almost like, and therefore people, I believe, who can't have that regularly, they need to start, it really comes down to personal responsibility. There's tricks to even, naturally, like I live in Santa Barbara now, let's face it, I cherry picked as best as I could because the primal vote is the body. Get it where you want it to be. But you can't, I'm 58 now. I haven't lived here all of my life. It took me, and it's like not easy to be here in the first place. However, there is something to be said about getting, even wherever you are, there's always tricks to finding find that way where you can find a little zen, where you can, even if it's just laying on your back, looking up into the sky.
Yeah.
Finding some way where you can get that spaciousness too, that just, being able to see that
Horizon,
you can just keep walking, it really helps.
Yeah.
It really helps people. And then I think that it just becomes inertial such that, your dogs, generally dogs don't need to be begged to go outside. Right? Depends how hot it is or cold or whether it's feeding time getting closer, whatever. There's nuances, but I really do believe getting people to do that more. And so like Luna Sandals, my company, became one of the ways that I could manifest a tool that would at one and the same time sort of tell the story about what I'm about.
Yeah.
And what I think, one of the things I think is important, and then also find a way to get in the game, of trying to come up with objects that people I can trade, people consensually can, vote with their money to try to do something to improve them. But the whole point of the sandal is, and it's one of the simplest ways to create a tool like a surfboard. It's kind of a platform, and usually you get a surfboard because you're going to go to the beach and catch a wave. And with a Luna, it's the idea of I wanted to create footwear that's paying homage to all this tradition of sandals that have been part of the human experience since the beginning of time, so that you're learning how to take a very simple tool And since it's your hand, your brain, your foot, putting it on and realizing that in so many situations, that's the preeminent tool. You
Yeah.
don't need, you don't need more. And then just this idea of finding footwear that would allow the foot to do basically, I really like the idea of portable ground, such that a foot's sort of harnessed in something that's bringing along, but it's almost all constantly just doing what it would do no matter what. You're just having this little admixture. I really love that. I just love that idea that footwear is something most people need, and finding a way to play that game. So that became a way to express, in my case, an entrepreneurial opportunity that turned out to be, there's no way. It's like footwear is so complex. It really is.
Oh,
Even
well, I
if you
mean,
get to the simple as sandal,
the
half
whole thing.
sizes and yada yada. It's like I really started understanding it is you've got to, anybody who bothers to go and do something and finds a way to solve that so that they can keep it going. These skills, this is another kind of like human skill, like figuring out how to use your nook of the universe that gives you such a unique vision, like everyone's own personal history, all the insights they've gained from their mistakes and from their successes and all the rest of it, all their networks, like you've been describing, all those things meld into an individual that ultimately has a bead on the universe no other person has. And as they solve problems for themselves, they may or may not come up with something that ultimately ends up being valuable for others, that they could either share through stories, or if it's an object they might invent, and they literally start lifting others up with themselves. That process,
Yeah.
in human culture, it's self-forming systems. They don't have a commissar. There's no committee most of the time. It's just these interesting interactions that are happening by free individuals just investigating their lives and seeing.
Yeah.
And so and that's a kind of spaciousness in the human connecting world. And when that's real, rather than driven by bots and algorithms and AI and all, when it's real, that's a human community network. And that is actually valuable. That's valuable.
Again,
and
I think that comes, that goes back to the connection thing though as well. Like there's a guy, I don't know if you read his book, there's a book called Lost Connections by Johan Hari, discussing like depression and stuff like that. And, those connections that you get through real, interactions of like people just wanting to, having their idea and running with it and like bouncing the ideas off other people and, building, whether it be like lunar sandals or whatever. Again, those are the connections, like the connection with nature and being outdoors, which give people like a sense of joy and bliss and love of life and the world and whatever else. And I honestly think when I read that book, it was one as a nurse where you've just been educated to be like essentially medicate the shit out of you pretty much, and then you suddenly you hear and you see how connection is like actually what everyone's missing these days. And these things, our phones kind of are amazing. I'm fucking talking to you on the other side of the world, but at the same time they suck us out of it as well. And it's crazy.
That's right. I totally, I mean, that book sounds fascinating. I really, I hope you put that in the notes.
I'll put it in the notes.
Definitely check it out. But it's an absolute, it's so absolutely clear. And so the one quote that connects to all, I mean, there's an underlying, back to the trend, there's an underlying sort of like attitude about being that people who end up being able to really approach life in this sort of affirmative way, they tend to have grabbed hold of something. And the best way I've heard it described is there's this Baptist mystic. I mean, it's an unheard of thing in the American tradition. It's a dude that grew up in segregated Florida. His name is Howard Thurman. He was Martin Luther King Jr.'s mentor at Boston University. And he was a trippy dude. He was actually, he gave the sermon that was part of the 1962 Marsh experiment. That's where Timothy Leary's student gave the, there were 20 theological students, 10 were going to get a heroic dose of psilocybin and 10 were going to get a placebo. And it's that study by Walter Pahnke became his PhD thesis on mystical experiences. It was a longitudinal study, so they followed those guys for the rest of their lives, basically. And those experiments proved to be quite valuable for the people who experienced. But the guy giving the speech that day is Howard Thurman, who okayed the experiment in his chapel at Boston University.
Right. Oh, there you go.
And this dude's quote that I love, that I actually I wrote an article, or I got published in the Chicken Soup for the Soul. It's like a good feeling story thing. I wrote The Roots of Barefoot Ted, and it starts out with Howard Thurman's quote, which is this. He says, "Don't ask what the world needs. Instead, ask what makes you come alive, and do that. Because what the world needs are people who have come alive," right?
I like that.
And so when people are finding those little solutions to a problem they're having, and then they find a way to package that and make it so that they can make that easier for somebody else, many other people, that kind of sort of starts all these. And we are literally, when I say we're at the spear point of all this experimentation that's happened before us, I literally mean our ancestors dreamed of, hoped for, fought for, struggled to have a world similar to the one we're having.
Yeah.
And we're needing to do our own nuanced, we're seeing where it went too far. I mean, who wouldn't want to open a box and bing, bang, boom, there's everything you need right there in a refrigerator. I swear to God, endless chanting, people fighting, great. It's all there. We have our own new natural world, which has its own disharmonics. But if we can harmonize ourselves, if we can regain some of these qualities that we're talking about, if we can find that balance in the maelstrom of it all, we have more access to more things to do more good than anyone ever did before. And I truly believe at the heart of it is, as it expresses in a grassroots sort of way, most problems that we see that are just like the niggling problems that are never going away can go away quickly when everyone's not doing the same thing with the wrong way.
Yeah.
It's way better to have a whole bunch of different, because there is no cookie cutter solution to life. This idea, there are global issues, that's true. There's no doubt about it. Yeah. But the fact of the matter is, there is not a way to solve anything. And one great thing that we have these days that we didn't have 100 years ago, these days I do business with my friends all over the world, including Vietnam and including Japan and including China and Germany. These are all my friends. 100 years ago, I was seeking out how I can kill those motherfuckers, right? It's a better world, period.
Yeah, definitely. And what's his name? Steven Pinker says that all the time. I think that, we're really is the best time ever to be alive. If statistically,
but if you're not connected, what does it mean, right? If you're not connected, the best world is disconnected from you. And what do you feel? Fucking depressed.
Yeah.
So how do we get more people connected? Well, one way is some of the things, just getting back, inhabiting your body again, inhabiting it again, and starting to understand that the ecology of the body is the first. If you want to save the fucking world, folks, start with the ecology of your own body and your own mind.
Yeah.
Because if you don't get that, all you're preaching is literally the substrate that's growing the consciousness that allows you to preach isn't being fed. Get on it, folks.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Clean your own bedroom, as I think what's his name says.
Amen.
So, because I want to get into a whole bunch really, but one of the things I want to obviously just chat about is running, I guess, because you are best known for, I guess, running, let's say. Now, again, I'm not too worried necessarily about, techniques and stuff, chatting to you about that, because I think, one of my teachers, Helen Hall, who I'm kind of working with to try and resolve my issues and everything else, it's always like you've said, there's no cookie cutter. Everyone runs to their own body and their own history, and, you can run.
What the hell
Exactly.
are they running for? What's their need? What is even inspiring? You know, there's
What are you
so
running from? That's always
much to it.
been something which my wife and I always kind of, you know, it's weird because I've always kind of said that with people who are doing ultras and stuff. I've always been like, fuck are they running from type thing. But it's weird
Exactly.
though. So, but weirdly, like I don't feel like I've got anything to run from. I'm like extremely heavy, but I am now, my body is starting to come to a stage where I can actually get running again. Like I've had knee problems and, you know, it's kind of lifetime issues, which are now resolving. All of a sudden,
Nice.
I love the idea of, I don't want to run from anything. I want to run to explore the possibilities of what my body, my breath, and
Exactly.
everything can do, which to me, the ultimate thing about running an ultra or running a distance isn't necessarily the physical, but it's more the mental.
Oh yeah.
So from your perspective of someone who's run the Copper Canyon and Leadville and everything that you've run, like how does the psychological side, I guess, like play out, or you know,
Yeah.
for you,
Oh yeah.
and how do you deal with that, like when you're in it or when you first started doing it, and is it different now to, you know, when you started doing them?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, so first of all, my most recent experiments in long distance stuff has been really playing around with this idea of what's the least amount that gives me the most, right? In other words, like how can I train, like I was able to successfully do it in 2019. Then it's been screwed up since
Yeah,
after COVID,
COVID and
but
shit. Yeah.
I was doing my training and I got to the point where I could do what I would consider extremely minimal amounts of training and still be able to go. And the Leadville 100 is a great barometer of skill because it's all above 10,000 feet, you know, or 3,000 meters. The whole race is above that. And it's 100 miles and it's in the mountain and so forth and so on, right? So you've got all these really serious complexities that are like big wave riding. I like to think of, for me, that became my big wave riding. Now, you don't want to do that every day. You don't really want to be in big waves. It's tough.
Yeah.
It's tough. And you know, and in the end, it's worth it if you survive. You get these exhilarating experiences, but it can beat the hell out of you, right? So, but the 100-mile distance became for me a way to experiment. And for me, the experiment was this. It's basically learning how to live 100 years in a day.
Right.
And right. So attitude is really going to, you know, first of all, you have to have the body is going to have to be taken care of. All, you know, you can't be playing around with this stuff early on. You can't be having problems early on. Matter of fact, my joke has always been, you better feel damn good at 50 if you want to make it to 100.
What is that,
You
miles
better
and
be
in
feeling
life?
good. And Leadville has a way of kicking your ass such that it really is hard to feel good at 50. Because basically at Leadville, you run for 40 something miles and then you climb to the point where you can't even breathe anymore at 12,600 feet. Then you descend back down into this other valley on the other side of that mountain to get to the 50-mile turnaround point, only to have to turn around and go back up that thing. It's just like, I swear to God, it kicks your ass. However, if you find the mental part of it is learning how to wash one dish at a time, be here now, continuous analyzation of what is happening to you, continuous ahead of the game, continuously monitoring. Am I pounding it? Is what? And just this, it's a self-monitoring and being aware of what's happening all the time. And furthermore, one of my strategies and part of my training has been different things, but one of a huge one has been breathing.
Yeah.
And I do a lot of my training, my running these days, which is never measured really per se, but it's very limited.
Yeah.
And mostly nose breathing. I really love expanding where and what I can do in the nose breathing realm. It's really fun. It's a really easy tool to really get a lot of bang for your buck, in my opinion. And at Leadville, one of my tricks has always been how I breathe through the race, which is extremely important to do it well if you're coming from sea level.
Yeah.
Most people can't, like 50% don't make the race, right? Can't make it through the race. It's just that hard. But many more people from sea level can't make it because it's notoriously difficult to exert yourself under the pressure of not having enough air.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I on that, like just on the breathing, because he brought that up, like I've kind of my nursing, and then, I've done a few courses with Brian McKenzie, obviously, Patrick McEwen, like breathing's like my thing. I love it, either for both performance and for like health.
Totally.
But when I run, like at the moment, I've just been getting back out, not doing big distances, but I did like 3 runs last week of like 5 to 7K, but I've been doing it like all barefoot with my mouth taped shut. And
I saw. Yeah.
And literally my idea is, because again, I don't have watches. I don't have like, I set a Strava just so I can see roughly what distance I do. But essentially I run to my body. I use my body's own feedback. And so I always say this to people is when, especially New Year, everyone goes, I'm going to start running. And I always say, if you're going to start running, run with nasal breathing, and you'll suck balls at first. You won't be able to do it for shit, but give it 4 to 6 weeks. And if you run nasal breathing, and you'll probably be fast walking for a chunk of it, actually, you'll suddenly be able to run 5K comfortably, recover quickly, not have the burn, you'll be able to stop at 5K having done all nasal breathing and talk in sentences, and you won't be super red-faced in the same way, and blah, blah, blah. So yeah, when I heard you say about you were just playing with breathing for your with your running.
I've been loving that. I mean, breathing is such a cool, I've always been fascinated by it all my life. I was, even as a little kid.
I was gonna say, but to be fair, if you're surfing as well and you spend time in the water, do you know what I mean? Like I kind of do some free diving, and I spend a lot of time like practicing long breath holds, 5+ minute breath holds.
That's right. Oh yeah, that's legit, man.
And I think if you spent your life surfing and you're kind of under the water, having an appreciation and understanding of like, I'm getting roughed up here, and not shitting the bed when you've got to suddenly hold your breath.
My God. That's what I mean. When I look back, that's exactly, like, I got all that kind of stuff through, like, the survival.
Just living.
Just living. And now I look back on it and I realize, if I didn't, and it was same with barefoot running too, I started realizing, and this is why that's why some people just, their life experiences give them something that allows them to set an example, let's say, but they may not have the, because they didn't have to teach themselves in the same way that a teach. So I think some teachers are really great. They are able to solve the riddle for themselves through some inside a coach or a person, and then they become more efficient at helping other people maybe get to that space. With some of these things, I've never bothered to become a coach because I really, it's like I just like, it's like there's so many underlying things that it's like I got from being in that mouse, doing those things as a kid. I really don't want the responsibility, like, for when it comes to like bringing people down in some of the places that I used to go and think, I don't want to take anybody to do that. And I want to tell you, actually, last weekend, I did I went with these 2 dudes. Both of them are TV guys. One is called Matt Graham. I think he has a TV show called Dual Survivor. I have not seen it, but I hear it's cool. And they got another guy named Dan Baird, and he's got some, there's so many of these like dudes get dropped into some place and they survive. Yeah,
that kind of
but
thing.
They're both really cool dudes. And Matt Graham, who's a Luna runner, wearer, whatever, he said, "Hey, would you like to join us on a 50-mile, 4-day desert primitive run?" And so 2 weekends ago, I found myself with 5 guys total, totally off the grid, in a place called Escalante, Utah, in the middle of nowhere. You can see no human beings, no sign of human civilization anywhere, in these extremely complex desert canyons with extremely dangerous and, not conditions of all kinds. And we went in without water, without really proper food, without sleeping bags. And dude, it is so good to get down to that. I mean, it's not for everybody, I'm telling you, but it was easy in the sense that I was never fearful of my life or anything like that, but we were seeing mountain lion things. I mean, it was on and on. But what's so cool is you get down to that primal place where you're catching your food, you're finding what you can eat, you're traversing all this complexity, you really don't have much, and yet you're doing pretty darn good. But you realize survival for our ancestors was a full friggin' time job.
Yes.
It's a full-time job. And that's why I'm saying all these prayers of our ancestors was for the heavenly place we live in, which can be a hellish place too if you're disconnected. But I guarantee you, so many of the things that we take for granted now, believe me, spend 3 nights in the desert without a sleeping bag, man, and you'll realize it takes a lot of time to make your bed every day.
I mean, I would like, that kind of thing. And I don't know why over the last few years, like, I don't know, last 2 years, I've just had this, like, that's the sort of stuff I want to, I'd love to be able to just like go get dumped in the desert with a couple of other guys and just like learn, just experience and just do it.
I'm telling you, if you've got a person, we had Matt Graham, and if you have people, it's not where you're going to have a huge population of people, right? Deserts and desert canyons and all of it. You're not going to bring every Tom, Dick, and Harry there and everybody's going to be okay. It's a harsh environment, and it doesn't have a crap ton of resources for maintaining a large population. However, if you know what's there, it's a smorgasbord. And if you have the right guys who know, it's almost like if you have a computer but you don't know what a keyboard is, and even if it's on the internet, what good is it for you? But if you've got the dude who knows how to tap, 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 bing, bang, boom, and nature is like that. I mean, the world and our ancestors were using the same skills that have created all this interesting technology that we use now to do things like to figure out how to strip this bark off of this dog vein and then roll this in and create a cordage that you do this and you twist it around here and you put it on this rock and you have this trigger and you do this thing and now you have a trap that catches a squirrel.
Yeah.
It's like, it's still technology and it's still complexity of being able to put all these things together, build this kind of little machine, and suddenly you have an ability to get a squirrel at a time when you're not even there. I mean, this capacity of ours in the world that we live today, you have ways to leverage it in way more interesting ways. These little traps. Now, this becomes the ethical question. What should I do with my time? What should I trap? What should I eat? Well, that becomes, now you finally, that's what happens when you finally make it where you're not just like struggling endlessly.
Just struggling to survive. Yeah.
Yeah. Then if you're not connected though, then your mind's filled with all the ghosts and goblins. And my shaman friend who has an ancestral medicine shop in Chihuahua City, Gibbs Zubiante, he goes like this: when you start having bad thoughts, his thing is you just say cancelado. You basically cancel it out.
Cancelado. Oh, nice. Yeah.
Cancelado. And people need to do that way more. And one of the strategies for happiness for me is you do have to connect to real sources, people that you can trust that have stories and messages that are positive, people in your environment and whatnot. But there's so much shit you need to disconnect from. And one of them is that endless chatterbox called the television with all those fucking doom and gloomers who get paid by making you feel
bad about
yourself. Thoughts. That's their job, man. What a sucky job. It's like, oh my God, you just literally spew out endless fear and uncertainty to people endlessly. And I wonder why people are so
I was saying I was chatting to someone the other day. I think it was when I was just down in Cornwall this weekend, and I was just saying to my mate, like the two of us were saying, like, we haven't looked at the news for months. I mean, I used to wake up every morning and was a scroll and just like,
of course.
And it's now at a stage where like I don't have my phone anywhere near me when I go to bed anyway now. So, but like I just I haven't even looked at the news for like 6 months, and then
a very good habit, man.
And then when you do look at it,
my eyes. Like if I'm even in a place, I mean, I'm telling you, it's like I've been doing it, so it must have some value. But I literally avert my eyes. Like I'm at an airport, I do not just, you just see it, people like get hypnotized.
It's
And I swear to God, it's the worst effing crap.
but the
I don't
weird
even
thing
care
was
if
in
it's
my
important.
head.
If it's
Well,
really dangerous or important, believe me, everyone around you is parroting that shit all friggin' day long.
that's the thing.
That's
In
all
my
they
head,
talk about.
or not even in my head, but just in general, I'd always say, it's like, no, you need to see the new. You need to keep up to date. You need to know what's going on. And now I think I don't watch it at all, and like I don't think I'm missing out on anything. Do you know what I mean?
You
Like,
really aren't. You're
there's nothing
creating
I'm missing
news.
out on that
No,
I
you're
think.
creating new information. And in the end, people should curate what they take in, don't just let anybody give you anything on the street. You just walk down the street and let anybody just hand you food, hand you pills.
Yeah.
Because thoughts and ideas are like, they're chemicals. They change you. They change who you are. They change your expression. I mean, just get in a fight with your wife, or your partner. You can fuck up a good situation in 1 second with the wrong information. You know what I mean? And the news is basically like a bad partner always. They're always looking to come up with some terrible fucking thing.
I mean, it's even worse in America.
But that's their business.
I think in America, you've got even worse.
Watching this show, folks.
Yeah, exactly. Just keep watching this. In America, you've got even worse than we have because it's even more like polarized and more like made up than.
Look, I've been out of that business for so long now. I don't even know. In the end, spaciousness.
Yeah. Spaciousness
doesn't get all fucking concerned. If you really are a space, and I was telling my wife this yesterday. We're starting to get a little heated. I just went out and suddenly I have all this spaciousness. Now this thing that looked like such a big fucking problem in my box.
Yeah.
If I get some spaciousness, it gives it some perspective. And it's no longer, it's there. It's not like I'm trying to like pretend like I don't have a problem here. But with spaciousness, it's a new opportunity, right? You suddenly realize
it's a new lens.
There's a friggin' right over there. There's a fig tree. It's like stop thinking it's all here. And now you're all cancel out of that shit. Look around, go outside, breathe. Bam, you're going to get a new insight. And once you get into the strategy of living where your setbacks are really new opportunities to find a better way to solve that thing that failed, and then ultimately by that back and forth, you're going to discover a new route, a new channel. And ultimately, you're going to be a pioneer in that space.
Yeah.
And if it continues to do good for you, you don't even need to tell anybody about it. They're going to see it's doing good and they will be attracted to what you're doing. And therefore, there'll be this and I see people like you, I get to meet from podcasts and being Barefoot Ted gets this opportunity of being able to meet all these people who have become teachers. And I almost like being like a musician for musicians kind of thing. I sort of like being able to see all this because I envisioned it coming. I recognize that this is a space that needs to be fully, and there's no end to it. There's always going to be new ways and new communities and new places in the world where these insights will be necessary, and people will find a way to leverage their insights into either services or products or experiences that people feel compelled and happy to vote with their money to get access to. And when we all play that game, those plus sum games, i.e. situations where people who are locked into thinking that in order to gain some value, you have to take something away from somebody else, don't understand how it really works. And they're limiting themselves by assuming, if I make more, I'm just taking from X. Yeah, if you're a state or a marauding herd of people going around and thinking that you just take things from people in order, that style does exist. It becomes professionalized to some degree. But in the end, the reality, the good stuff is all people interacting with each other and building each other up. And man, when you get to see that in action in places where it's really worked well, nice little villages do that, township. There's places, England has lots of places that did that, I think. Little communities that for long periods of time, there's usually a church and there's some like
little
some of
village
the
shop and a pub.
serious hardware of a community
Yeah.
that gets reprogrammed every generation. But ultimately, it's nice to have those hardwares and those kind of like those sceneries that aren't changing like endlessly, you know. And there's so many. I love. By the way, I just absolutely love England.
I mean, it is I'm crazy lucky. I live like in the countryside, basically.
Yeah, where are you? What part of England are you? Are you England?
I am England. I'm on towards the east coast. So I'm like an hour and a half east of London, basically. So I'm near.
What's the area?
So I'm in Suffolk. So I'm you've got Norfolk and Suffolk are in that big bulb sticking out the side. So I'm near Ipswich. And like kind of.
Well, anyway, England. Yeah, I've spent a lot of time in. I've been in Cornwall.
Okay, so
I did that lizard to Land's End race.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
That's really cool, man.
It's a lovely bit of coastline around there, isn't there?
That's a lovely bit of coastline with a terrific amount of history. And then I spent a lot of time in Surrey, and I really like that area. That is really cool area.
Yeah.
There's some near Box Hill. There's this place called Dorking. Very interesting. Anyway, I mean, there's so much, and Scotland. I mean, it's a fabulous country. It really is. It's just the winter suck.
And also us Brits, we always underappreciate where we're actually from. Do you know what I mean? I think everyone wants to get away in some ways from their own place, but it's kind of I definitely don't appreciate it at times. Like going down to Cornwall when I'm down there, because my wife and I have been going down there a bit more recently. And I ran a whole bunch of the coast from like Newquay, which is obviously the main surf spot around England. So I ran sort of Newquay, just doing like 10 milers, but it was just beautiful. Like,
it's so amazing. Pretty. It's like you just can't even believe. I mean, when you grow up in America, you just think England is just some god awful, foggy, boggy,
I mean, at times it definitely is. It definitely is.
Oh yeah. Oh, I've seen those places too. I've seen those places too. They exist, but there's plenty of places that are not like that. And I think people need to really explore that. One of the things I was mentioning though is that hardware. Yeah. All those old churches and it's really cool to have that stuff, actually.
But also I think that's the same with especially, so I'm in a little village called Layham, and we've got a little pub and it's cross the road. But to me, like in our little village, you've got Upper Layham and Lower Layham. They're divided by a river, but like the pub is smack bang in the middle. And it's amazing to me, like the pub is just a hub. And it's like, it's where
totally.
It's where the old, there's an older generation who have been there, but then there's a newer generation coming in, and you get different generations conversing. And
gosh, such an important social construct, right? And you just said the pub is and it is. There's no mistake that there's a connection between those two. And then you've got this social lubricant, usually made with materials that are grown in the environment. It's an incredible little culture there. And I do believe that, like, I'm trying to, you've got to have one and the same. It's really great to have those kind of real, true communities so that you can, because that's that connection you're talking about, right? That really is connection at its deepest level so many different ways.
And unfortunately, I feel like, and you kind of alluded, but like, as when things are smaller villages, it's so much easier as you get to bigger towns, cities, that it's so easy to stare blankly on the underground or the tube and not like smile. But like, I can't quite remember how you put it, but I was thinking when you said it, there is something about like the infectiousness of like, smiling and how, that kind of way of like passing something on without having to do anything is so underappreciated. And actually,
it's so true.
The joy and happiness and bliss and stuff that can bring to someone just by, when you're not used to it, like just smiling and sticking your thumbs up or, giving them a nod, like, and they'll probably just be a bit like, that was weird. I don't know if I like that. But then it kind of ticks in their head and all of a sudden it's kind of a contagion.
Yeah, there is something about, in the end, first, back to the idea, first and foremost, figuring out how to having the wherewithal required, literally the will, the intending will required to sort of get yourself tuned in such a way that you begin to remember these little strategies when you need them and apply them at the right moment. It's like we're beginning to have access to all these incredibly great tools and insights through storytelling and experience. And I guess in the end, intelligence becomes the capacity to get the right tool out at the right time to get the job done right.
Yeah.
And the real trick of it all is finding ways to make sure the easiest way to get the furthest is to build little bits of inertia into the system by making sure you're doing a little bit of good all the time, a little bit of good. You don't have to have these impactful weekend warrior things, but every day have a practice where you're not having to catch up 3 times as much. It's basically like that Zen. The guy shows up at the monastery. He says, "Look, man, I want to get enlightened." And the guy says, "It's going to take about 5 years." And then he says, "Well, I'm willing to work twice as hard." And he says, "Well, it's going to take you 10, something like that." It's like, get into a daily strategy of a little bit better rather than like is a good, as particularly as you get older. I'll be 58 in a week. So it's like, I'm saying 60 is the new 21. I'm saying the world is so complex.
Yeah.
We have so many new, interesting opportunities. We're having all these tools and access. It's really taking a long time to really understand what it is that we have. And I'm really, truly believing 60 is the new 21. And I mean that, like you were describing with your running, as you're learning how to sort of appreciate it in a new way, as you're learning some of these new things. I'm telling you that so many of us have so much work to do on ourselves to just clean up of the mess of the last, sort of like attitude that literally being able to feel better for a long time and just get out of the whole stupid story of like, I'm so many years old and therefore I'm blah, blah, blah. It's like, fucking stop this narrative crap. Do not tell these stories. It's like bad news.
Yes.
Don't say things with certainty that you don't know for your case that that's the case. Yeah. And there's so many things about aging that Dr. Daniel Lieberman, the guy that's in Born to Run, who writes a book called The Story of the Human Body. It's these mismatched diseases. People think it's the human condition. No, so many of the diseases that are the scourge of modern man are his own damn friggin' behaviors.
Yeah.
Come on, folks. You're not a broken machine, but I'll tell you, if you keep feeding it the wrong thing and not letting it do what it wants to do, it's going to get very unhappy. And unhappy machines, when they're called humans, damn, those suckers break down fast.
They do. I mean, that's like, I've got one more thing I really want to just bring up in it, or just ask in a minute. But before I do that, it's like, I'm 20 years you're younger, I guess. I'm 38, just turned 38. So, and in a part of me, it's always like, well, I'm nearly 40, and I've got ideas of like, I want to do some like fucking stupid big runs to challenge myself. And I had a guy on here, Nick Butter. I don't know if you know Nick Butter. He was the guy who ran a marathon in every country of the world. He ran 192 marathons in 190 countries. So I had him on and chatted to him. But he did that when he was like 26 or something. And all of these people did all of these big things when they're in their like 20s. And I'm pushing on 40, but I feel like once I get my knee to a place where it's like properly happy, I'd be at 40, I'm in a better headspace and physical space than I ever was when I was in my 20s. And so the idea of being able to go off and do something ridiculous, part of my idea, I would love to run the entire coast of the UK barefoot.
Oh, yeah.
Like that's kind of on my dream list, and I'm not quite sure.
I love it. Yeah, that spaciousness, that stretching those imaginative boundaries. Ultimately, I think that's the ultimate value more than anything, is you get to prove. It's like a way of proving to yourself something that really literally just takes will, right?
Yes.
I mean, if you, as long as you're not, I don't care how much will you have. If you're putting, crap fuel into a Mercedes Benz and the engine's not tuned right, and you decide you're just going to drive it harder to get to where you want to go, you might accomplish your dream, but I'll tell you that car is not going to be a happy camper. So finding a way whereby you can stretch those imaginative boundaries, and it's not a stunt. It's really more about, what can I do to manage what I need to do in order to see what's possible for me? Because as you stretch those imaginative boundaries in your physical space, you'll begin to find strategies of how you'll apply. Ultimately what I think ultra running did for me was just have another avenue of verifiable results.
Yes.
That allow me to tell myself that I was able to achieve this. What other thing do I want to set my targets on now? I was able, and so it gives you that kind of, where it becomes a problem is if you begin to not be able to self-report that you're enjoying this process, right? At some point, it's way better to have achieved that crazy thing, like you're saying, and then come back and really apply it to something else. That ultimately, but I do believe you get a kind of, there's a kind of metal that you gain, that you need to have that courage to go and bite off a little bit more than you can chew, that everyone knows. Oh, that motherfucker bit off more than he can chew, but look, he did it. And there's something everybody loves to have. You get that in your hand, it's undeniable. So I do believe it's just a natural inclination. I'm trying to find new way, in the running world, it's like I more or less now like a soul
done everything.
But I have other equipment and other dreams connected to skateboarding and other things. I see all these other new, and so I'm using the same framework like what you're describing now in your stage right now. But I do believe you're going to need to. It seems to me like it's just inevitable. You've got to get yourself in one way or another. Find something that you can bite off and see if you can chew that thing down.
Exactly. Well, when I get around to doing it, I'll make sure I just get myself a pair of Lunas before I do, just in case.
I'm never going to say no to that. I mean, we're working. I mean, and there's cool things. One cool thing about being in the sandal world or footwear world is like being able to see down the road. Like there's always things that I would like, in the end, it's all about, like, I'm the chef of the restaurant, and it's like, if it doesn't pass if I don't like it, if it doesn't taste, so same with sand. It's like, if I don't like the feet, I'm always trying to find like that thing that makes it a little bit more pleasant, a little bit more enjoyable, a little bit friendlier, and at the same time trying to keep the grammar very basic, like not add more. It's always, so being able to create these objects that people use in one way to sort of like go ride their big waves. Dude, I get so much positive karma coming my direction for being that character. Man. So I'm really stoked. I mean, I love hearing these stories of people getting ready to do so whatever. And I mean, it's a million things. Maybe, I don't know what if you go all the way around the coast of the UK, Lord have mercy. That would be one hell of an adventure. But in the end, almost anything you do in the UK, like there's so many. Back in the day, and Lloyd, the guy that I was talking, that I'm talking about, guy he was writing about running in the 1890s. He's got so many cool things he was writing about. I just translated or transcribed he wrote an essay of the test of parent power, and he was helping make an argument to like young people. How can they know? There was like the debate back then was, how can you know if you're fit enough to have a child? And he writes a whole thing, and he comes up with such a really interesting insight about like you and your partner. Basically, the sum total of his idea was, you and your partner, the weakest being the leader, will first of all work up to the point where you can trot 1/2 mile together without stopping. So they work up to being able to get to where they can trot 1/2 mile together, 1/4 mile in, 1/4 mile out, without stopping. And then they do that together for 30 days in a row, basically. And he says, I can tell you with great certainty, you are fit enough to be a parent. And you know what? I started thinking about it. And, he was writing all these, he was so on top of it. It wasn't about it was about finding just that right amount
It's little and often.
Probably shows you, and time's not important. Just being able to get into that state where it ultimately becomes as easy as if you're walking. That kind of trot that our ancestors can get in, that you got to be able to get in if you want to go a long, long way. You're not running like a maniac.
Yeah,
you're finding a way to get into that zone where you're actually creating. That you've heard of the runner's high. You've heard.
Yeah.
This is an endogenous cannabinoid experience. Most people don't know that. But the euphoria you're getting from running, one of the euphorias you're getting from running, one of the little admixtures is called an endogenous cannabinoid. So you're literally making cannabis in your body, and it's attaching to a receptor, and it's creating an antibody, the bliss molecule. So Lord have mercy, those steady states that you can get into that allow you to go quite far, very efficiently, quietly.
Yes.
And that space is, I'm telling you, that's where all my runs, I just try to get into that space and imagine this is where I want to always be. I want to always be right here in this perfectly balanced between not too much exertion, not too, just the right amount of breathing, just the right amount of flow, just the right amount of movement, and building that. I think it's like yoga, finding a way to, first of all, get into that position, and then finding a way to hold it in a way, let's say, that's less and less strain, and it's just starting to feel like it's just like I'm perfectly founded here. I just love that. That's what I think you have to do.
Well, I mean, that might be to a certain degree an answer for this last question. I always finish off with this last question, and I tend to throw it on people so they have to suddenly think on the spot. But this podcast is called Move, Breathe, Live. So if you were to offer one piece of advice to whoever's listening, in which they can take away something from this chat, and they can go and spend 5 minutes a day putting it into practice, what would that be?
Damn, it's pretty easy these days. I swear, I've got I really take a lot of inspiration from that dude, the nature man. Where he literally just went off and stripped off all his clothes, laid down, and just like was basically like, fuck, I'm dying here, I'm gonna die. And in the process of just doing that, I swear, if people could find a way, I'm telling you right now, this is the best advice I'll ever have. Find a way every day, or nearly every day, or as much as possible, where you are 5 minutes basically naked in the air with the sun on you. As close to naked as you can get for the season and the place, right? Don't be a moron or a creep. But nonetheless, I swear to God, man, 5 minutes of just standing on the earth in your bare feet, breathing with some sun on your face, even not moving. I love it. I swear to God, it's like I've been lately. I've had a sauna, I've had cold plunges, about all these things, and now I live at the beach and all the rest. But I set up a thing where I can get in part of my house in the back corner where I can be. There's a certain time, the hottest part of the day, I go lay out butt ass naked for. I swear to God, it's so. I couldn't believe it. I've never really ever done that. I'm not really, but I've been reading this. I'm like, okay, fuck it. I'm going to give this a shot. I swear to God, it's ridiculously too good. I can see why it would be snuffed out too quickly. It's such simple medicine, folks. Sunlight and air. And
there you go, guys. There you go.
We don't do it enough. We actually don't do it at all. Don't do it at all. Yet I'm telling you, it's a fundamental part of the human condition for so long and so much that the 100 times other things that live on you, the substrate of you, there's 100 other microorganisms that are living in and on us. They need sunlight too, man.
Yeah, man.
Not just you, not just your cells, but all those other good things actually like sunlight too. So don't fail to get at least a little bit of that every day would be Barefoot Ted's advice right there.
There you go, guys. Simple. Just get naked and get outside.
There you go. I'm all for it. But, check your local laws and regulations, please.
Exactly.
Health and security.
You can't
dial up health and security and just give them a little check-in before you go for it.
Barefoot Ted takes no responsibility for your.
That's right. That's
your
right.
legal.
Do not have your doctors writing me. I never said it.
Well, thank you so much for joining me. It's been an absolute riot and a joy, and I feel there's so much that people can take away from this. So, yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks so much for coming and joining me.
You're welcome. Hey, look, I hope to in the future get some people from your side of the planet to come over and visit me in Santa Barbara, California. I'm developing all kinds of little, now that COVID's more or less sort of a hopefully nipped in the bud and gone away for the time being, I definitely want to share I've got some retreat ideas. They're just like, about getting cool people to come and assemble somewhere. And then what's nice about living on the ocean with mountains in the background is you can get a lot of great experiences in a short period of time on your own 2 feet. And I really want to do a lot more of that going into the future.
Well, I mean, I'm in. Just hit me up. I'm there.
Right on, dude. Right on. Right, well, thank you so much for having me. Yeah,
thanks.
totally.
It's been a pleasure, and we'll maybe do it again sometime soon.
Amen. Hallelujah.